Welcome to Miami, Ramanand. Thank you for allowing me to ask you more questions as usual. Thank you. I wanted to start with your experience and telling us a little bit about your evolution of your practice and your teachings since you began studying with Iyengar.
I was lucky that my father practiced yoga, and I was born in Africa. Because of the war, they took me to India. I was very young. I fell sick, and at least once I was pronounced dead. So my health was ruined in the village. The irony was that when I was 12 years old, my grandfather wanted to see me. So they took me back to India. And my father taught me yoga in the same village where my health was first ruined. When I came back to Africa, I continued to practice whatever he had shown me. And I felt fine. For one whole year, I did not miss a single class in the school.
How old were you?
I was then 13. So that was a very nice start. And I can't say I consistently practiced after that, but every time I thought I was going to get flu or something, I'd do some practice. And most often it helped. And then whenever whichever new place I went to, I would look for a teacher. And I studied with many different teachers until I met Mr. Iyengar in England in 1966. Okay? That changed everything. I first met one of his students, Helena Thomas. Probably the best Iyengar teacher I've seen. Very, very good teacher. And then 2 months later, Mr. Iyengar was coming into town. So she asked me if I wanted to be in the workshop. And I, of course, said yes. So I met him then. And I don't know whether it was my good fortune or just the fact that I was Indian.
Maybe that got you a foot in the door.
Yeah. And he asked me after the first class, he asked me to go to India, which I did a couple of years later. But that first class was very amazing to me. His reputation was known that he is a very strong teacher. And I have never seen this done afterwards, but there were 15 or 16 of us in the class, supposed to be teacher training group. I was complete newcomer. So he was introduced to everyone. So he came to me and asked me, what is wrong with your right shoulder? And I thought, wow, this arm had been paralyzed. I was surprised that he could see it without an X-ray. So I started to tell him the history of what had happened. And he said, yes, we will see. Cut me short. The class was supposed to be 2.5-hour class. He went on for 3 hours. Under our feet, there was a puddle of sweat. Very tough, probably the toughest class I've been in. Then he says to everybody, you can now lie down and relax. He says, not you. At which point, this body was like a rag doll. He could do anything with it. He put me in Sarvangasana, stood on my arms, asked me to rotate really strongly out. And I could not have been there more than a minute or so, but it felt longer. So when I came out, he asked me, how does your arm feel? How does your shoulder feel? And in those days, we didn't call him Guruji. I said, it feels very good, sir. So he says, that's not a feeling. So I said, feels marvelous, stupendous. And he said, no, you're not talking about a feeling. I said, sir, I don't know what is it you are asking. So he said, your shoulder feels full, doesn't feel empty anymore. Because all that time it was like the shoulder didn't belong here, it was out there. And I was very surprised. I had seen some of the best authorities in the world for shoulder joint. None of them could help. And here was Mr. Iyengar in a space of 3 hours, not only makes it feel better, but he knows what the feeling is. So I saw him in the bathroom afterwards. I said, I was looking for a good yoga teacher. I think I found the world's best.
You said this to Mr. Iyengar.
Yeah. I didn't know him.
The beauty of the beginner mind.
Beauty of the beginner mind. So he said, yes, come to India sometime, which I did later.
And how did that involve? Did he continue to work on your shoulder?
He continued to help somewhat. I think on the one hand, what he did definitely gave me confidence, improved the shoulder. On the other hand, some of the movements that I was consistently doing were wrong. because it destroyed the cartilage
In your own practice?
in my own practice. And with his teaching, his guidance. He would ask me to hang from a bar and, flip over, flip back, which definitely improved my confidence. But it began to, bone grinding against the bone, destroyed the cartilage. So some 7 years ago later, I needed a surgery, which to this day I'm not sure was a wise decision. But I was told either have a surgery or going to need a shoulder replacement soon. So I opted for the surgery, which then completely destroyed anything that I could do before. Like downward dog, I cannot get. First, I could not get up at all. Now I can get up, but the head doesn't go anywhere close to the floor that it used to. Full arm balance, back bends, everything is not on anymore.
Did you ever have like a teacher training with Mr. Iyengar? Or how did you become?
Teacher training was with Helena Thomas, which was excellent. I used all that information later to run the teacher training course in San Francisco, which became very well-known institute then. And we had input from Guruji every so often. But to learn from him, you had to be in India. In any event, he did not run teacher training courses.
Ever?
Never.
But he was teaching you?
He would teach. And then at some point, he would let you help in the therapeutic class. That's where most of the teaching happened.
So it's really like the old-fashioned one-on-one where you're learning.
Yeah.
So what happened to that kind of learning? Now there's like big group teacher trainings.
I don't know.
Do you still run a teacher training in San Francisco?
I do not.
Not anymore?
No. Ever since certification became so important, I lost interest. We don't get this situation in India or where I grew up in the Indian community that somebody walks in and says, I want to be a teacher. You first become a student, at some point you grow into being a teacher. The kind of thing where a student comes and says, I want to learn yoga to be a teacher, in India that would be considered obnoxious.
And the funny thing is that none of the teachers in the institute in India have any kind of a certification.
No.
And nobody really cares.
Nobody cares.
Is it just in the United States or is it also in England? Or
I started in England.
Oh, so it's their fault that it all started like that.
In England, I think the situation was that the what is called adult education system in London wanted people to be certified. So Guruji started it there. But then it mushroomed.
And now it's become what it's become,
And maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. There are good things about it, some not good things.
Did you, over the years that you studied with him, for all these years, did you see a difference in how he was teaching?
Tremendous difference.
What was the difference?
Well,
changed?
at the beginning he was very firm, even harsh. Okay, that after he got his grandchild, it slowly mellowed down.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that happens to teachers. They get a little more mellow.
Yeah, they get older, plus they have grandchildren. This is what makes a big difference. The way, for example, he taught Abhijata is very, very, very different.
One of the things that I've noticed over the years of studying with various Iyengar teachers is that you teach some of the more esoteric kind of teachings, like you're teaching us mudras and mantras, and you teach us, the bandhas and some of more of the energetic kind of practice. Why is that not taught more, or why is it that you choose to teach that?
Well, firstly, Guruji very rarely shared that information.
But he did.
But he did.
To you? Or to certain people?
Yeah, to certain people. He would mention it on the passing, and then later outside the class, if you ask him, he might share something more. The other thing was that I had the background in those things from my father and from other earlier teachers I had met. At some point, I heard him say, I think we were at a convention somewhere, and he said, I don't want newcomers, beginners, to start inventing into new things, but you should feel free to come up with new things. So I thought that was a permission he granted.
I remember he said that in one of the times that I studied with him, that, you might come up with some more innovations, not just mine.
See, the rigidity of the certification system doesn't allow that, but then I have no interest in it anyway.
So it's good for us to remember that and take that from him, that his way of teaching us was he was very creative.
Krishnamacharya modified what was taught to him by his teacher. Three major students of Krishnamacharya, B.K. Iyengar, Pattabhi Jois, and Desikachar, all three are completely different from each other. And as long as you don't violate certain basic principles, okay, like in every system, standing poses are important. Okay, that's the foundation. If you violate that, it's no longer the system. But even the name Iyengar Yoga was very strongly resented by Guruji in the beginning. And there is electricity expressed in wide variety of ways, but it's electricity. So yoga is like that also, expressed in many, many different ways, but ultimately it's yoga. What is forgotten in yoga, which, these mudras and bandhas and all that is okay. What is forgotten is God. Then it's no longer yoga. That must not be forgotten. Whereas that is put on the side like, oh, this is just a belief. It's not. It has to be understood.
Well, I subscribe to that as well. But what about somebody who's atheist or somebody who's Buddhist and somebody who doesn't maybe believe in God?
Then it needs to be explained to them what God means to us. Okay? If they think God is somebody sitting up in heaven with long beard, that's not what we think of God. All that is here is God. This is our concept. Okay? So whether the Buddhist believes it or not, all that is here is. It's an expression of divinity. People come with their own idea of God. When somebody asks me like, do you believe in God? I usually ask them like, do you believe in Kudung?
In what?
Kudung.
What is that?
That's what they ask me. What is Kudung? I said, you don't know Kudung, so you can't tell me whether you believe or not. Same way when you say God, I don't know what you mean by God. Explain to me. Yeah.
It's a label.
It's a label. You explain to me what you think God is and I'll tell you whether I believe it or not. To me, God doesn't require a belief, it requires an understanding. Belief would be a problem.
Could it be a feeling?
Don't turn feeling into a fact. Then it's okay. If I walk into the room and I feel cold, and there's no good pointing at a thermometer on the wall, okay, I feel cold.
That's the fact.
But I can't turn that into, no, it's not a fact. I feel cold is a feeling.
Well, it's a fact that you're feeling cold.
Yes, you can say that, but I feel cold, it's a feeling. Okay? The fact is the room is not cold. That's a fact. It's proven by the thermometer. Right? If I feel cold, I can't say the room is cold. Room is what it is. I feel cold. People turn feeling into a fact, which is responsible for many problems.
It all starts here in the mind.
Many problems with the relationships and everything. Feeling is turned into a fact.
What is it about mantra and the body? Like, how is it that I chant something, a word, a sound, a syllable, or the name of a god? How is that going to help me? How is it going to change my life?
This is a vibration. And a Sanskrit language is highly systematic. So vibrations have their effect. Okay? I know very amazing instances where this was a doctor in Pune. He had talked with me like an interview, and he told me about his experience. He said he had leukemia, which as a doctor he would know that is not curable. He had 2 blood transfusions done in Bombay at a very famous hospital, but it came back again. So I asked him, I said, so how did you cure yourself? He says, by chanting Gayatri Mantra. Okay? And that was a fact. Okay? Whether he can teach that to somebody or not had to be discovered. He wanted to tell me all that, so I tell Guruji that this guy cured himself by chanting. What do you have? But that never happened. Chanting is very, very, very powerful. The more accurately you can chant, or the more accurate chanting you can hear, the more effect it will have.
Will it have bad effects if you have bad pronunciation?
Generally not. See, your mouth cavity is designed, fortunately, for the right kind of some vibration to come from that. If your intent is good, it will help. If your intent is evil, it can hurt you. Your intention counts a lot, because your intention also generates vibrations inside the body.
What about mudra? What does this do? Does this have some kind of a scientific connection to my brain? Is there a
No, it's a connection of different nadis.
Okay.
Okay. There are different nerve endings in different fingers. Thumb is a very dominant. Okay. Not much scientifically is known about this, but people who practice mudras regularly will tell you what the effects are. Like when I first taught this mudra for heat, the requirement was that you should not practice it often. The student I have in San Francisco, he came back the following week and says, I was in the ocean in the cold water in San Francisco, and I held the mudra and says I was not feeling cold. Now that comes partly from his belief. Right? So belief matters, your knowledge matters, your practice matters, your devotion matters. Okay? Belief, as you know, is a very powerful thing. But I've met people who have very powerful energy that way. Okay? Not only in their own practice, in their own chanting. If they touch you, you will feel a difference. Amazing. And not only in India. One therapist I went to in China, it's on my website. Okay? He would touch you and put 200-300 volts of electricity through you.
Instead of using needles, he used his hands.
His hands. He would do his qigong and touch you. Okay? You are standing on a wet towel. Other than that, there is no electricity conducting thing around you. Okay? I am a graduate of University of London. I am a civil engineer. For me to believe that this electricity can through my body is impossible. But I experienced it. And at that first time I went to him, there were 16 people in the group. Everyone he did this to. So, there are energies about which in our Western science, allopathic science, we don't know very much. But they should not deny it. As far as asana is concerned, if you consider the whole field of yoga, the only thing asana really does for you at spiritual level is, while you are practicing, you are not out there causing some damage. It has no other spiritual value.
Yeah.
It's a physical thing, very, very good for your physical energy. It will help you to progress in spiritual energy also. But in and of itself, if you only practice asana and don't emphasize anything else, it's going to make you proud. Okay? The very thing that is supposed to demolish your ego will have the opposite effect. That pride will cost you. Fortunately, that pride will cause you enough damage, so you'll eventually come back to the right path. But it's like you're going, big circle around to get to the right place.
Very nice to be having this conversation and to be on your path.
Thank you. As far as asana is concerned, if you consider the whole field of yoga, the only thing asana really does for you at spiritual level is, while you are practicing, you are not out there causing some damage. It has no other spiritual value.
Yeah.
It's a physical thing, very, very good for your physical energy. It will help you to progress in spiritual energy also. But in and of itself, if you only practice asana and don't emphasize anything else, it's going to make you proud. Okay? The very thing that is supposed to demolish your ego will have the opposite effect. That pride will cost you. Fortunately, that pride will cause you enough damage, so you'll eventually come back to the right path. But it's like you're going, big circle around to get to the right place.